Morning, everyone. Let's start with the next part for module 5 and fiber optic networks. So we had left yesterday at GMPLS, which is one of the switching techniques or methods. So we'll do the next part, which is the optical burst switching networks, and then move to the last part of the syllabus. So uh, OBS or optical burst switching basically will combine the important aspects of circuit switching and packet switching. So we already know what is the difference between circuit switching and packet switching. Circuit switching will establish a connection between source and destination beforehand, whereas packet switching will allow the packets to be transmitted at different times, and then at the receiver, these will be combined together and sent at the receiver or the destination. So what is the difference between those two and burst switching? So burst switching operates at the sub-wavelength level, and therefore it will enable very fast setup and removal of any optical network light paths. Uh, so OBS is also referred to as a hybrid switching and routing technology, and it will use electronics to control routing decisions, but data is always kept in the optical domain, so there is not much delay. And the diagram is showing you the concept of optical burst switching. So you can see that there is a burst header cell, the data burst, the multiplexer, demultiplexer, and the control channel. This control channel will help in establishing the routing and assigning the wavelengths, and there's the WDM links. So the process is that packets which will have a common destination, they'll be kept together or aggregated in some edge node, and this kind of aggregation is known as a burst or data burst, and each of this bursts will be transmitted separately from data control packet, and that control packet is known as the burst header cell BHC, which will contain the necessary information. I mean, information which will be used for switching and destination and having the address. So this diagram basically is showing you the concept of OBS, where you have four edge routers of a very large WDM network, and the aim is to establish a link between the data source, the receiver. Either you can do it individually or by using multiplexers or demultiplexers. So the optical burst, which will contain the data burst as well as the BHC, will travel on some control channel. Any idle channel, the channel which is not being used, on the access link, the link that we are using to transmit the data, it will be selected when data burst is required to be sent. On the other hand, the BHC will travel on the control channel ahead of its data burst in time, and this will be processed electronically at every node in the path. In the OBS, the edge router, it will receive the BHC and it will assign the incoming burst to some channel which is available on the exit link or the outgoing link, and this will lead it towards some destination which is desired or required, and this will also establish path between specified channels on the access link and the channel selected to carry the burst. So the edge routers will also forward the BHC to the control channel of the selected link, and this will modify the cell to specify the channel on which the burst is being forwarded. So every time you have a source destination connection which is required, this process will be repeated along every routing node along the path which has been selected. So the BHC here will also include some offset field, and this will contain the time between the transmission of the first bit of the BHC and the first bit of the burst, and this length will be specified. This length will be used to specify the time duration of the burst. So you can have a single or multiple channels on every link or every optical link, which can be reserved for control information, and this is used to control the dynamic assignment for the remaining channels to other user data. So this process can carry multiple wavelengths, very large number of wavelengths or users, and the user data in the form of burst can basically be transmitted dynamically compared to the static provisioning which was being done in, let's say, SONET, for example. So the OBS routers in this case become very important, and they are dynamic routers. So the diagram here is showing the edge routers function. If which is an optical burst switching network. And this it will provide some assembly of burst, how the bursts are assembled together, and also the disassembly, that is the opposite process at the ingress and the egress, at the entrance and at the exit points. So you can see that in diagram A, every user will operate different on a different format, so they can use the internet protocols, so the Sonet, ATM, it depends on the user, and the user will send different data to the edge router. So you have three users, one using IP, Sonet, and the other using some other format. They are sending their burst or the data to the edge router. Then the router is going to deassemble the data, and it will issue some DHC. So you can see that there is C1 and C2 in diagram A on some DCC, which is the data control channel, and this will be done in advance for burst 1 and burst 2. So every burst here will contain different data, obviously. The burst 1 will contain some PA2, PS1, PA2. That depends on the user. So we cannot tell the user what to transmit. So the user is going to transmit the data that they want to transmit. The network should be efficient to handle that data. So to perform the assembly, the collection of the burst, you can look at diagram B, and the control channels provide the control channel will provide the BHCs, that is C3 and C4 on top for data bus 3 and 4. The users are then going to receive the corresponding deassembled data that the router received from the core router. And you can note from this diagram that disassembly at the egress edges, that is sending to users, is simpler than assembly of the burst. That is burstification. The transmission here becomes a little more challenging compared to the reception. So in the disassembly case, different signal formats, these can be used. Then various signaling and control protocols can be employed to enable optical burstification and OBS. So additionally, the reservation and the scheduling of resources for burst switching in this process are the most important factors when burstification will consider end-to-end burst transmission, and the disassembly or the latter will focus on assigning and managing the resources, the routes, and the wavelengths for individual bursts within the OBS nodes. So overall, what happens with the OBS? So there's some amount of information which is put for the OBS. So depending on the network dimension, that is how long the network is or how short the network is, and what is the granularity, that is how much is the burst size, you can have a one-way or two-way signaling protocol which can be used at the edge routers of an OBS network. So if you have two-way signaling, you need to send back an acknowledgement to confirm the safe arrival of the signal. Whereas if you have one-way protocol, then obviously this kind of feedback is not required. So very popular one-way protocols are tell and go and just enough time, and these are also known as the one-pass reservation protocols. For two-way signaling, you have tell and wait and just in time, and these are basically used for burst reservation and scheduling. So there's some information on JET and TAG which I put on the slides, but OBS as a total is what is mentioned in your syllabus. So this previous diagram becomes very important, and what is going to happen for the burstification, that is how the burst is handled from the users to the core router, and then from the core router towards the user using the edge router. So there's some amount of data on that one-way signaling and the two-way signaling. Given the difference between the JIT and TAW protocols, and these will utilize the ATM delayed transmission, and they can also wait for the acknowledgement. The track protocol basically is delayed with respect to the control header, and then there'll be some kind of delay. So there's more information on this. So now let's look at the optical network deployment. So the optical networks, these are basically going to depend on use of advanced fiber transmission, development in optical components. For example, we're trying to move from electrical regenerators, or optical electrical regenerators, complete optical regenerators. So we are looking for optical component enabling technologies and evolution in the network strategies. So associated protocols should be efficient, very high capacity operation should be possible, and these are the requirements from any optical network deployment. And in the past decade, there have been several advancements which have been made, but more so now, there are going to be more advancements. For example, we've tried to make the network flexible in assigning the spectrum uh, to increase the bandwidth or the use of the immense amount of bandwidth which is provided by the fiber. Apart from using OFDM in the spectrum domain, in the frequency domain, the space division multiplexing can also be used. If you combine a lot of fibers together, and it will multiply the capacity. So these are some of the trends which have been used very recently, and there's been a lot of progress on the PSTN side, on the residential side, the office side, and the local area. So this is one of the diagrams for current or the future, so to say, an optical network. And this will basically depict DWDM network, where the channels are going to be packed very closely. And this will also have the add drop channels, because you're going to use an OADM or an OXC, and there's going to be optical amplifier, and there's a core ring which will connect the LANs, which will connect to the multiple metropolitan area network, and then you can have the access networks, and that will be connected to the satellite communication and so on. The whole point is that this fiber will be used to provide a large amount of bandwidth, and many LANs, WANs, and MANs can be used to get a lot of capacity out of it. So the current and future deployment is it basically what is required when you talk about an optical network to deploy. So this is split into different parts. So let's look at these parts individually. So you have the very first part, which is the long haul networks. So this kind of a network is going to connect several regional or national networks together, and these will also be referred to as the core or backbone network. We have seen this before, and they will interconnect long haul networks to extend global interconnectivity. This is the core or the backbone networks. Uh, so this will basically comprise of P2P DWDM links, and obviously because the length is very large, the length of the link is large, on the network is large. Therefore, you require optical regenerators at endpoints, and the amplifier, if you want to keep everything in the optical domain, is the EDFA needs to be used. This is what is shown in diagram B, where you have EDFS, and you see that the length is basically some 600 kilometers. So the optical 3R regenerator, basically the amplifier which will also shape the signal, is typically 600 kilometers. It's used placed around 600 kilometers interval to reduce the degradation of the network. So to achieve the improved connectivity, these P2P links, these can be interconnected using a mesh topology. You can also use a ring topology and any other topology, but we have already discussed that the mesh topology is the one that is a good topology, even though it is a complex topology. So this is an example of a long haul network, the NSF net, which is used in North America, United States, and using this core or backbone network, it is possible to interconnect optical nodes which are situated in different cities. So you have the European organization EU network, or QNets, which is going to carry high capacity optical network. And just for an example, it is 5,400 kilometers long, and it will interconnect about 18 cities. And then you have a submerged cable links in Europe to the UK. This is also a long haul network which will connect about 20 cities or so. And the major cities in US, the diagram for which is shown, is also connected using the optical network. In India, basically, we have the IndiaNet, which is connecting about 14 major cities, and BSNL and MTNL are trying to connect them using optical fibers under the BharatNet project, which is currently becoming very popular in India. So the existing core networks, they're constantly being evolved, driven by traffic patterns, the requirement of the user, and also improvements in photonic devices, and using lesser cost but more service from the service providers. So this kind of optical networks, they are classified in relation to the maximum distance which they can achieve without using regeneration. And this can be the extended long haul or ultra long haul core networks. And the approximate ranges for them are about 600 to 1000 kilometers for long haul. Extended long haul will be 1000 to 2000, and ultra long haul will be 2000 to 4000 kilometers. So for improved distance, larger distance, you need to have improved modulation format. For example, using PPSK will not be enough. You need to have higher spectral efficiency, therefore QPSK or some kind of higher PSK, or a mix of PSK with ASK, which is known as the QAM. Some kind of MQAM, quaternary array modulation format must be used. And the entire aim is to have is to transmit more number of bits using less frequency. So in effect, getting a higher spectral efficiency. So majority of the existing long haul networks, which are also DWDM, these will operate in the channel rates of about 2.5 gigabits per second. But that is the rate which is not enough for the customers. Therefore, the next part in the optical network was a mixed line rate, where you can transmit a 2.5 Gbps or a 10 Gbps or a 40 Gbps. But as you increase the rate, you needed to use better modulation formats. With the elastic networks or the flexible optical networks, you can reach close to about 100 Gbps. But the modulation formats and the assignment of the frequency and wavelength, they become very, very complex. So you also have submerged or transoceanic optical networks, under the Atlantic kind of optical fiber. And this is under the deep sea, where the fiber is safe and not much effect happens on the fiber. So to construct such kind of network, uh, both attenuation and dispersion, which we covered in module 2, they need to be reduced. Uh, Also, since it is long haul, you need to use repeaters at every point, and these will be used to re-amplify the signal. Uh, the amplifiers, the optical, will also require electrical power, and these need to be fed to them using copper cables that will run down the cable, the fiber cable. And this kind of submerged system will demand the highest transmission performance from any fiber network. And you also need to take care of the budget and the environment conditions. So for such a cable system, the diagram is shown. So it will consist of two sections, the dry and the wet plants. So this will reside on the dry land and the seawater. The landing station will house the terminal equipment, and this will interconnect optical signal from submerged cable. And this will pass it to the terrestrial system. And you can see from the diagram that it also includes the repeaters, the equalizer, and some branching elements. So you can land on some other stations. So the next part comes as the metropolitan area network. So the metropolitan area network as such, or the metro networks, these will connect the regional interface and will interconnect many access networks and users. The access network will be the next part. So the metro network will be subject to various requirements. These will be very specific, and the demands of the traffic, and this demand is going to be different compared to the one used used for the core network. So the MANs basically will be characterized by rapidly changing patterns. So the network needs to be dynamic, and the network needs to be scalable, modular, and also you need to reconfigure the network. So these are some of the things which are required in the metropolitan area network. Apart from this, they are supposed to be cost effective, and generally the MANs are they usually use a ring topology. So you can see from the example that there are two metro rings. These are interconnected by a digital cross connect, and that cross connect acts as a hub between the two networks. So the ring one on the left hand side will constitute a metro network, and providing the means for interconnection to the long haul or other networks, that is ring two. While ring two will interconnect metro networking with several other enterprise networks. So MANs basically are into two segments. The central ring with the neighboring ring interconnecting the access networks with the central ring. So since the central ring connects the long haul network to the long haul network, sometimes it is also called as a core ring or metro core, while neighboring rings are called as the access rings because they connect to the enterprise. So such cross-connecting nodes providing interconnection between metro and long-haul networks. They are also known as point of presence. So these are various terminologies which can be used in a MAN. So an example of this MAN is showed in the diagram. So distances and number of channels are provided for a typically large city, and the network will include a central metro core ring and 5 metro core rings, which are connected to additional 12 dedicated links from premises. And the core ring basically is connecting to the access or collector rings through a DXC, whereas long haul interconnection is provided by DXC or OXC, whichever you use, on traffic type being carried through the cross-connect. So such metro networks will almost always provide interconnectivity between long haul and access networks, and their infrastructure will basically include the SONET, the DWDM, the MPLS, or the Internet. Uh, the most lowest cost MAN is the SONET or SDH, but we know that it's a static network. And the ROADMs, they may or may not be used there. So a successful field trial of ROADM with a wavelength and packet switch has been reported recently, and they've proven that the ROADM is a dynamic element, and it provides flexibility between node-to-node connection using the lightbox, and therefore the ROADMs have become a key component in any WDM network. So the combination of this metro with the access network, these can also, be used as the passive optical network, which we'll see a little later. And next comes the access networks. So the access network is an element of PSTN, and it connects access nodes to the individual users or MANs, and therefore it is the last link of the network between customers' premises to the first connection to the network infrastructure. So the transmission media choices providing strategies for the development of an access network are shown in the diagram. So using these different options, the access network can be provided from single point that can be located, at some local exchange or a regional hub, or at points of presence for a long haul network connection end users. So they are basically, these access networks are basically based on hybrid fiber coaxial cables, HFCs, and these are a combination of two technologies employing both fiber as well as coaxial cable as the medium. So original HFC was a cable TV, CATV, to provide TV broadcasting and reception. A generic form of HFC providing cable TV service to residential areas is shown here. You can see there's a hub there, there's a fiber, an optical node, and then a coaxial cable. So it involves both the fiber cable as well as the copper cable. And then you have an amplifier, and the signal then reaches different houses. So the optical nodes are going to employ optoelectronic transceivers. This can be transferred to a receiver, and then connect the optical fiber in the coaxial cable infrastructure. So in these networks, your amplifiers will be used as trunk and line amplifiers to amplify signal power on the cables to enable a large number of customers to be reached. So in addition to a coaxial cable, you can also use some other media like a twisted pair cable or radio to carry voice data and video signals. Therefore, the term HFX is sometimes also used, which basically signifies fiber with some other medium. If it is HFC, you have fiber with coaxial cable. If it is HFX, you have fiber with some other medium like radio or twisted pair cable. So DSL lines are the best examples of access networks, and this will provide broadband access over usually existing twisted pair telephone lines. And it's one of the most basic. It will provide you transmission rates up to 100 Mbps, but the transmission distance for this high rate is about only 300 meters. You can use the wireless access network using both Wi-Fi or WiMAX. This will offer about 1.5 to 75 Mbps, and the distance can also be about 50 kilometers. But there are different limitations on the bandwidth if you're using the wireless access network. So, access networks employing the fiber, uh, they can potentially support uh, large user per bandwidth from 10 Mbps to 2.5 Gbps. So this is an example of an optical fiber access network. This can be the feeder or distribution section. So this section of the network between the local exchange and remote node is the feeder, whereas the other section between RN and the network interface unit is the distribution. So the NIU, the network interface unit, will enable communication between devices that use different protocols by providing some transmission protocol. To facilitate this situation, NIU may require conversion of specific device protocol to some common one and vice versa. And one RN can serve many NIUs, either in a building or a house, thus serving many customers. The fiber deployment strategies are depicted in the diagram. Three approaches are shown, and this will depend on the distance between end users. So you have ONU, optical network unit, which is used to terminate the fiber connections. This location of the ONU and the distances from local exchange and NIU, this will determine the specific configuration of the access network. So if you can have fiber to the cabinet, fiber to the curb, when ONUs are located in a cabinet situation, some main street or some curb, and if you have ONU placed in a fiber in a building, that is fiber to the building, you have FTTC and FTTV. These are basically employed in business and domestic use. So FTTH has become very common, especially in our area, fiber to the home, and data here is transmitted over the fiber from some local exchange or hub directly to the end user. So FTTH is the one that we are basically used to. So this optical fiber access network will primarily employ passive optical networks, PONS, and these were referred to initially as passive since no components required electrical power except at the fiber end, which may have some optoelectronic device. So basic PON structure comprising of three elements, uh, connecting a service provider to an output device. This is shown in the diagram. Uh, So you can see that there is an OLT, there are optical fibers, the optical line terminator, optical network units, optical splitter or a demultiplexer. This will basically incorporate a passive optical splitter between the optical line termination at the provider end and an ONU situated at the customer end. So in the passive optical networks, a significant number of customers can be served. The output device is 1 cross N power splitter. The cost of maintaining the feeder section, basically the access network, that is shared, and both capex, which is a capital expenditure, and the opex, which is the operational expenditure. And these are the main issues to be considered when you are designing an optical access. So this current passive optical networks, uh, which will form the access networks, are have many categories, but basically the three: ATM PONs or broadband PONs, Ethernet PONS or gigabit Ethernet PONs, and gigabit PONs, GPONs. So we look at the different types of passive optical networks and the last part of local area networks in the next lecture.